Christian truths are things that we're constantly pressing forward in our knowledge of, but you cannot be a believer without that basic trust in Jesus Christ, the Son of God.
So the Bible is crystal clear about who Jesus is, and that salvation is through faith in him. But what about passages of the Bible that aren't directly related to the gospel, but are just as clear? I'll give you an example. 1 Timothy 2:12. I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. Rick Warren and lots of other Christians would say it's okay to disagree about that verse because it's not talking about salvation. Here's Warren making that very point on a podcast not long after Saddleback and the SBC parted ways.
Everybody in the SBC believes in the inerrancy of Scripture. Now we're talking about difference of interpretation. Those particular passages, Titus, Timothy, and Corinthians, have literally hundreds of interpretations. We should be able to expel people over sin, racism, sexual abuse, other sexual sins, things like that. But this is you mean, wait a minute, we can disagree over the atonement. We can disagree over election and we can disagree over dispensationalism. We can disagree over the second coming. We can disagree over the nature of sin, but we can't disagree over what you name your staff.
Okay, Rick Warren has committed at least 3 logical fallacies and has officially gone off the rails. He has taken the concept of theological triage and absolutely abused it for his own ends. He's in full-blown accommodation to the culture, only willing to identify serious sins that the culture says are egregious. Racism, sexual sin, financial impropriety. He's putting every other category of doctrine up for debate. This is not how the theological triage model is to be used. Dr. Naselli shows us a far more excellent way.
We may misuse the model to trivialize anything that's not essential to Christianity. So here's how some people would reason. They'd say, that's not a level 1 gospel issue. Therefore, it doesn't matter very much. Therefore, we don't need to think much about it or try to understand it and apply it. Definitely don't separate over it. After all, it can just be so divisive. So let's just unite on what's essential to Christianity and not sweat over the rest. Don't worry about the rest. And I'd say in reply to that, no, whatever God reveals to us is important. It all matters. Every word matters. We dare not minimize anything that God has graciously revealed to us. There are no insignificant doctrines revealed in the Bible, but there is an essential foundation of truth that undergirds the entire system of biblical truth. We may misuse the model to rationalize disobeying God. So to disbelieve God is to disobey God. And a fundamental way that we sin is by thinking that we know better than God does. And so we trust ourselves instead of trusting God. And that's an idolatrous arrogance that belittles God and steals glory that belonged to him. And I can't help but seeing this when people just dismiss the issue of what God says about men and women in the home and the church as if, that's not a first level issue. Stop arguing about it. Doesn't matter as much. Can you imagine saying to God on Judgment Day, but Lord, I didn't obey that because it's not a level 1 issue. A lot of Christians disagree about that. God says, I don't permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she's to remain quiet. 1 Timothy 2. And this recent movement called egalitarianism or evangelical feminism has done exegetical and theological backflips to change I do not permit to I do permit. And when someone says, well, the role of men and women in the church is not essential to Christianity, it's a level 2 issue, it's not level 1, let's just agree to disagree about this, don't make a big deal about it. I think if that's how we're using this theological triage model, we're doing it wrong, and we dare not use any model to justify disobeying God.
Theological triage is not simply telling us which doctrines are essential for salvation. Theological Triage is not attempting to minimize the biblical worldview to satiate our culture, to acquiesce to their demands. Lots of Christians are tempted to do just that when it comes to one of the most contentious issues of the day between Christians and our society, the LGBTQ movement. Here's another